This is section 5.4 in Honors Geometry, and it is on indirect proofs. We've done two-column proofs, paragraph proofs. Indirect proofs are slightly different in that indirect proofs are used to prove something is not true. And we'll go through a few examples of that. First of all, in order to do an indirect proof, the first thing you're going to do is make your assumption and then find the contradiction. That's the process for indirect proofs. First example, we're given this drawing. Given angle 1 is not congruent to angle 2, and we're supposed to prove that AB is not congruent to segment AC. So we're going to start off with claiming the given, and then we're going to assume the opposite of what we want. Let's assume segment AB is congruent to segment AC. So let's say these segments are congruent to each other. That's what we're running with right here. Well, if that's true, then using the isosceles triangle theorem, we can say angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Since those sides are congruent, then those opposite angles are congruent. But that's the problem. However, this contradicts the given, so the assumption is false. And segment AB is not congruent to segment AC. So we assume that something is true. We go with that until we find a contradiction in the given, and then we can say that that's not true. So the assumption would be, in fact, false. Here's another example. Given we have some triangles that are not congruent to each other, we're trying to prove that a pair of segments are not parallel to each other. So once again, we're going to start off by the given. And then we're going to assume segment TP is in fact parallel to segment IL. If that's true, then using PIAIE, we can say measure of angle 1 equals measure of angle 2, and measure of angle 3 equals measure of angle 4. So 1 equals 2, 3 equals 4. And we already have that segment IL was congruent to segment PT. If I look at those two triangles, what do they have in common? Well, using angle side angle, we can say triangle TPR is congruent to triangle LIR, and there is the problem. So to finish this one off, we would say, however, this contradicts the given, so the assumption is false, and segment TP is not parallel to segment IL. So we don't like to make assumptions in geometry, but to prove something is not true, we assume, well, what if it is true? If it is true, there are other consequences, and if those consequences contradict something else, then we know that assumption must in fact be false.